Okay, so we kind of are in the middle of the promotional chapters, chapters 13 through 15. And one of the things that we've really already covered is the fact that the world's best product at just the right price in all the right places means nothing if it's not communicated properly. And we talked about this is what the entire Promotion P focuses on. And we talked about compartments in your promotional toolbox. I mean, you've learned about it in the basic marketing course. There's advertising tools, there's sales promotion tools, public relations tools, personal selling tools, and of course a lot of this connects to what you can do with all these things either in an offline environment or online. And more specifically, what chapters 13 through 15 go into is advertising can be print, broadcast, television, radio, outdoor or transit, direct advertising. This can be in an online or offline environment. Sales promotion coming up in a little bit. What kind of incentives are you giving people to induce some trial right now or to keep them loyal? Public relations, we'll talk about that as well. Media relations, event marketing, other types of tools that are usable. And then, of course, there's personal selling, anything face-to-face or voice-to-voice. And this, of course, started in Chapter 13. We've already covered advertising. My focus here in Chapter 13 will be on public relations before we go a little bit into the content of Chapters 14 and 15. Otherwise, look at the examples in the book. Keep up with your reading. The details are in that. All right, public relations, something I think it's really important to cover with you guys. It develops goodwill. It develops understanding for different publics, relationships with different publics or groups or stakeholders. Customers are, of course, there, but so are employees, investors, the media, other groups or agencies that might be interesting or feel like they have a connection to your company or your brand. At times it can generate favorable publicity. I think all of you can look into this for your projects and ask yourselves, what is newsworthy about what we're doing? Tools, news releases. We're not teaching that in this course, but learning how to write a press release or a news release so that a news agency wants to write a story or develop a story on television about it is a great way to create some information about your product or your brand or your project. There are learning to do things like media kits, press conferences, how to hold those, who should be in front of the camera or microphones. Things like tours. For certain companies, this is more important than others, but certainly that's a part of them reaching out to different stakeholder groups. Articles that are written about your brand or your company in trade journals, professional journals, magazines, things like this. TV shows, talk radio shows, and appearances. Special events, we'll come back to that as well a little bit because I think a lot of you can come up with an event to launch or somehow connect to your project. I know some of you are already doing this. Event marketing is really a PR tool, but it involves advertising, personal sales, personal contact. Many times it involves sales promotion, so it's kind of a black hole. Certainly these days, social media, we're not talking about social media ad campaigns or advertising on Facebook, but certainly development of an Instagram account or following, a Facebook page for your company, your brand, things like that. And then there's the corporate websites, which all of you can connect to because I'm sure a lot of your secondary information came from that for this project. Advertising as a PR function, what Keegan and Green mean with that is there's things like corporate advertising. It compensates for lack of control over publicity. It allows you to control the message that maybe isn't connected to directly trying to sell someone something, but it's connected to things like annual reports, financial information, newsworthy items, things like that. It can call attention to the company's other communication efforts as well. There's something called image advertising. I think a lot of you are connected to this because I think you're trying to improve the brand's image, not just trying to sell more of a product or service to raise money and donate it somewhere. This enhances the public's perception. It creates that goodwill that we talked about. And then there's advocacy advertising. I think corporate social responsibility could fit in here, but it presents the company's point of view on a particular issue. In this case, it might be, child labor or the oceans or pollution or CO2 emissions and things like that. So I think these kinds of things you can easily connect from Chapter 13 into your projects in a fairly straightforward way. The role of public relations in global marketing communications. Of course, we're living in a more volatile world. Coronavirus, wars, famine, people fleeing, refugee crises. It helps build some consensus and understanding. It creates harmony and trust for the company and their brands. It looks beyond just we're here to make money off of you, but we're here to make a difference in the world. It helps articulate or communicate and influence public opinion. You actually can improve the brand's image just based on the CSR campaigns that you guys are coming up with. It can anticipate conflicts or resolve disputes. It can be a bit more proactive if you choose for it to be. And things like smartphones, broadband, internet connections, social media, satellite communications, these things allow public relations professionals to stay in touch with media anywhere, anytime in what has become as the 24/7 news cycle. Now we're on to Chapter 14, just a little bit about sales promotion and personal selling. Again, the details are in the book. For sales promotion, think about along this lines. It refers to any paid consumer or trade communication program, and it's got a limited duration, and it adds some kind of tangible value to a product or a brand or to a company. If advertising says, please become aware and eventually buy us or spend money with us, sales promotion kind of says, buy me now, try me now. There's, of course, as Keegan and Green talks about, price versus non-price promotions. Price might be a coupon for this percentage or this many crowns off of the price. A non-price promotion might be a contest or a giveaway or something like that. And then there's, of course, consumer versus trade promotions. A lot of times it's going to be more focused in your campaigns. If you use something, that'll be more focused on the consumer, the person you're trying to sell to. It provides an intangible incentive to buyers, like we said, kind of like buy me now or try me now, and it can reduce the perceived risk associated with purchasing a product, especially for the first time. It can also be used, for example, as a way to reward existing customers. Hey, you've been with us for a while. Here's a free gift or a coupon for 50 crowns off or whatever it might be. This is what, like being a member of a Coop or an ICA, having your ICA card says, here's 25 crowns off because you spent this much money with us over the past month, things like that. It provides accountability for communications activities, and it provides a method of collecting additional data for your databases and collecting information on customers and using it. It doesn't mean you're going to use all of these things in your projects. I think most of your projects are not going to use sales promotions, but I've got at least a couple groups this term that are considering it. Issues and problems, of course, it comes back to legal issues like fraud. The book talks about Pepsi promotion with Apple. Regulations, back to the political legal environment. This varies by country. What you can do in one country, you maybe not are able to do in another country, especially as your ideas to change the world expands just beyond your test markets. And of course, this is connected to cultural issues and dispositions to, coupons in some cultures are great. In other cultures, they're kind of considered rude or embarrassing, as can other forms of sales promotion. An example of this that comes up in the book, Malaysians see coupon usage as embarrassing. Islam frowns on gambling, so sweepstakes might not work. Okay, personal selling. There's some interesting things because I think all of your projects has some kind of voice-to-voice or face-to-face communication going on. But again, this is any form of person-to-person communication. It can be between a company and a representative or a prospective buyer. It can be anywhere in your value or supply chain that this face-to-face is going on. And so you can use any of this during any part of your value chain. You certainly don't have to use it during all of it. But it's to inform people, to persuade people, to influence negotiations and business meetings and what might be decided or discussed at those kinds of face-to-face or voice-to-voice encounters. The short-term focus, of course, is pushing people to ultimately make a sale, or in this case, to figure out ways to develop a donation or raise money to send to a nonprofit organization that's going to help people in another country. But the negotiations, the face-to-face, might be the nonprofit on the ground talking to political people or political figures in that country to see if it's okay and to avoid things like fraud and corruption and things like that. So it's not always directly focused on a sale. You get to use this in very flexible ways in your project. The long-term goal is throughout your supply chain to build relationships, of course. The hurdles to this are the same that we've talked about all along: political risks. Unstable or corrupt governments change the rules of the sales team. This is definitely towards the end of your supply chains, value chains, as you get the nonprofit on the ground in another country or in another part of the world where things are a bit riskier. The regulatory hurdles that we just talked about and seeing what's actually allowed in certain parts of the world. I think the first one, of course, is going to come up for many of you in this project. Certainly back to the economic environment, not just the political legal, but the economic environment. Currency fluctuations, increases and decreases in local currencies can make certain products unaffordable, so it doesn't matter what you're doing with a coupon or something like that. And then we're back to the cultural environment. A lack of knowledge of market conditions, the accepted way of doing business, or positioning of the product may derail the sales team's efforts. And a lot of times the companies make mistakes with these kinds of things. There's a very interesting theory or framework in this chapter for you guys to all consider in your projects. Again, you might just use parts of the framework. You might use all of it, part of it, one part of it. It might be only in a certain part of your value chain that you choose to bring this up. It doesn't have to be used multiple times, even though you might mention that. It's called the Strategic Consultative Selling Model. And it talks about these different areas that building quality partnerships is surrounded by a personal selling philosophy, which is made up of, starting at 12 o'clock, a relationship strategy, a product strategy, a customer strategy, and ultimately a presentation or communication strategy. We'll go over each of those just briefly. The details are, of course, in your textbook. Personal selling philosophy, the thing that circles the framework, it's a commitment to the marketing concept and a willingness to adopt the role of problem solving and creating these partnerships. And then the relationship strategy, it's your game plan for establishing and maintaining high quality relationships with prospects, customers. I think this is easily usable in all your projects between the company, where the brand is, what you're selling to make the money, to create the revenue, and then where you're donating money, that partnership with the nonprofit organization. This is where I think most of you will use this model. There's the product strategy, the plan that can assist the sales representative in selecting and positioning products to satisfy customer needs. I think you're doing this by default by adding a CSR component to what you're trying to still make money from for these companies. The customer strategy, the plan that ensures that the sales professional will be maximally responsive to customer needs. Again, I think you're kind of doing this by default by making it possible to connect to this corporate social responsibility idea to change the world, the merger or the marriage between the company and its brand and the nonprofit organization that they are now partnering with. And then the presentation strategy. It consists of setting objectives for each sales call and establishing a presentation plan to meet those objectives. Very briefly, Chapter 15, I think you guys are all experts in this, but of course I think you should go in and look at and appreciate the history of what you've all been born and raised with, about what has gone on to actually make the internet what it is today and how it continues to change. I think this kind of historical perspective is really important because a lot of millennials, now Gen Z, you don't understand how it all started. And what's happening ultimately is that we're seeing the convergence of technologies that you guys are taking for granted now, but just a few years ago, these were separate technologies that had little, if anything, to do with each other. It's called convergence theory, and it's happening more and more these days, for example, with how online gaming, the internet, and virtual reality are coming together as well. But global e-commerce, this is more important in some of your projects than others. I'm thinking of Netflix groups and stuff like that for this term. There's different types of websites and different ways of looking at this. B2B, B2C, there's C2C, things like eBay or Swish for payment. But there's even B2G, business to government, or G2G, government to government types of relationships. Of course, most of you in this are in the B2B for your nonprofit connecting to your company and brands. And then, of course, B2C because you're ultimately trying to reach consumers. And what does a website do? There are promotion sites. These are more marketing communication oriented. There are content sites, news and entertainment sites. It supports public relations efforts. These days it comes down to influencers and people with their own blog websites or YouTube channels and things like that. Those are all content sites as well. They often make money based on their traffic because they can sell advertising space and get sponsors and product placement and things like that. And then there's the transaction sites, the online retail operations that you and I all use on a weekly or at least monthly basis these days. Some websites, of course, can be all three, but most of them are primarily focused in one of those three areas. So, for example, how would you see Netflix? Well, it's a content site. I think it's a promotion site. But, of course, it's a transaction site because it's there that you sign up for and ultimately pay for your Netflix streaming service. Again, just using or connecting this to some of the projects in class. And then, of course, all of this is moving on to smaller and smaller devices. I like that Keegan and Green dedicated an entire chapter to this. But whatever we're reading in that chapter is really outdated, but it allows you to appreciate where a lot of this stuff is going on. That's a real quick review of the final parts of the promotion P. Sorry we couldn't do it in class, but now you've got a little bit of perspective from me for all of this.